Chuck Fresh, the PCGYN. This is Computer Care Clinic's Tip of the Day. We have a lot of requests to go back to some of our basic training courses that we haven't offered in about 6 years. Because believe it or not, a lot of people are just getting into the whole digital photography stuff and some of the older stuff that we've gone through. So for those of you who are a little late to the game, we're going to reissue all these old, they were actually PowerPoints, and we gave them as classes in our store. And actually, we're going to do them again. Due to popular demand, which is really crazy that that many people want this old material. But hey, whatever. Let's throw it out there again in case you missed it the first time around. So today's training seminar, I guess it is Digital Photography Basics. And this was a super popular, probably the most popular class that we gave back in the late 2000s. 2008, 2009. Had hundreds of people take this course, and I'm very, very happy with it. So this, if you don't recognize it, is Waikiki Beach, a incredibly overrated small beach in the middle of a city that looks like Los Angeles now. The beauty about digital photography is you could just blow off a whole bunch of these pictures, and you don't have to pay for film anymore. It's beautiful. You have unlimited, virtually unlimited storage of digital images. You take as many as you want or as few as you want, and you could show all your friends, relatives, and show off to everybody that you've been to Waikiki. And it's great. So you don't have to worry about buying film and getting it developed or getting it exposed or getting it ruined in x-ray machines. None of that applies anymore because digital is virtually free once you've spared the expense of buying the camera and the initial storage. But we'll talk about that as we get into it. So it's important to remember, as this young man is pondering, that everyone has a camera. Not nearly everyone. I'd say just about everyone has a camera of some sort, at least one somewhere, be that an old camera, smartphone, dumb phone camera, tablet, webcam. Think about televisions actually have cameras built in. Some of the new smart TVs have a Skype application built into the TV. So you can actually have that Jetsons wall phone, that 100-inch TV that Elroy used to talk to his friends on back in that old cartoon. And security systems are everywhere, and there's hidden cameras all over the place. People that watch babysitters and house sitters and cleaning people. And no matter where you are, you can just assume there's a camera watching everything you're doing 24/7. And the thing about that is once these pictures are in the digital domain, it's impossible to assume that you've gotten rid of every copy. Once it's out there, it's out there. Is that scary in some ways? Is it safe in some ways? Because it can actually protect you. And in a sense, it's a good thing because you can assume that you'll always have a backup of your most important pictures, but we'll talk about storage and how we get to that point a little bit later on. So essentially, if you lost a picture, a printed picture back in the day, maybe a wedding picture or something, if it was in a fire, if it was lost in a water damage, or you just lost it, or it got ripped up by an angry ex-spouse, your picture was gone forever. But now that's not likely because it's been forwarded, copied, stored in a couple of different places, and it's a good thing to have those backups for some of those very, very valuable pictures that you treasure for a lifetime. So remember back in the days, you had to, if you wanted to see somebody's vacation pictures, you had to all gather in this dark room and you had to bring out the slide projector and load the carousel and bring the screen down, and you had all your cigarettes and your scotch out. Man, they were good days, weren't they? But anyway, that's not the case anymore because you can actually watch a slideshow for with virtually unlimited pictures. So the good thing about the slideshows is you can actually tell when it was over. Because as soon as that carousel was done, they either pop another one on or it was over. They flipped the lights back on and you were done watching that painful, awful family vacation. But now it could go on for days, technically, theoretically. So you don't have that time constraint that you did back in the day with the manual setting up of the slides. So somebody could have taken 10,000 pictures and, man, you really don't want to sit through that. So fortunately, it's a different mechanism. People don't typically gather anymore. They'll email it to you. You can watch it at your convenience. Most people just skip through it, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so let's just skip the truth. So the bonus is if you have a computer, essentially you have the capability to make a free slideshow with all your digital images. Windows has stuff built in. Apple has stuff built in. And there's a ton of free apps for smartphones and tablets where you can just throw all those pictures in there, and it'll do really neat things. It'll zoom in and out of them. It'll do really creative transitions, things that can only be done by professional movie studios and television studios back in the day. So now you've got the mechanism to email it, to put it on the web, put it on a DVD if you still use one of those, or you can even connect your PC, tablet, or your smartphone to a TV via an HDMI connection and play your slideshow for everyone in the family room, just like they did back in the old days without the cigarette smoke and scotch. Well, you could probably still have the scotch, but so free is good. The FIG program, my father-in-law calls it. But if you're not careful, you're going to have thousands and thousands of pictures just scattered all over the place. Now, cameras aren't real smart about naming them. They're going to give them these kind of cryptic descriptions, usually some kind of, today it used to be the DSC and then put a numerical consecutive value after it. Now, most of the stuff will put a date on it at least, so you'll know what day. If you can go back, all right, I went to Hawaii on this day, and you can kind of narrow down the date range, which is a lot more helpful. But some cameras, digital cameras, some phones don't do that, and they're going to put this cryptic, maybe not even chronological number after it, and you're going to have to hunt and peck through those pictures, and man, that's a pain in the butt, especially when you start developing thousands of them. So it's very, very careful to stay organized up front. Put everything in the folders, transfer them to your hard drive, and back things up. And just be as organized as you can possibly be, so there's less chance that you'll lose stuff, and you'll be able to find them when you want them. So let's start talking about some of the digital camera features. There's jump right into this. There's different types of zoom. There's the optical versus digital. So optical uses the lens, the glass. It actually brings that image closer to the sensor that's going to record it digitally. Where digital zoom just takes that same flat image that's a million miles away, doesn't care about the glass, and it just tries to fake it. It's trying to interpolate it. And you're going to get a nasty, as you can see here, a really nasty, blotchy, pixelated is what they call it, image from a digital zoom. So try to avoid digital zoom at all costs. Unfortunately, if you have a smartphone, you're probably very limited. You may have to use a digital zoom, but I recommend not doing that. Just take the wide shot and then try to bring it up in photo editing software, which you're going to have some better luck with. The software and the computer you're using it on to do the editing afterwards probably more powerful than the circuitry inside your cell phone trying to manipulate that digital zoom. And once you take that crappy digital zoom picture, you're stuck with it. You can't go back to the regular one and do the editing later. So always take the wide shot and try to avoid digital zoom. If you have optical zoom, great. Use the glass, use some good glass, and bring that image completely in as close as you can, as close as you need it with really good focus. So talk about resolution, and we'll talk about megapixels. So a pixel is, a lot of people think a pixel is just one little dot. Well, it kind of is, but it's made up of three colors. The primary colors are red, green, and blue. Now, in light, they kind of, as opposed to paint or pigment, they kind of mix together red, green, and blue. If you mash those three colors together with different levels, you can kind of generate any, with pretty good accuracy too, any color of the rainbow, of the visual spectrum. So we've got three little tiny dots, and they combine to make a pixel. And you have millions of pixels in these digital images, and also on your screens too. So. And each pixel has its own set of values, which is red, green, and blue, a certain level of each, and it has brightness and saturation. So you're able to put those pixels together and generate what looks like an image on your screen with very, very stunning accuracy and very good clarity. And of course, the more pixels you have, the clearer the image. You're starting to see these ridiculous amounts of pixels now where Apple started with their Retina display, which most displays have matched or even surpassed in some cases. And those pixels are so close together that the human eye can't really distinguish a space between them without a microscope. So we've pretty much gotten to the level of where your eye can't tell that there are pixels putting those images together. Whereas you looked at a TV before, you'd be able to see lines. If you look at an old computer display, you could see those little dots if you looked at it close enough. But now, very hard to differentiate the space between those things, and it's getting even better. I don't know how they're doing it with new quantum dot technology. Watch our HD TV video that talks about that. So we get into megapixels. We talked about a pixel. Now we're talking about megapixels, or a megapixel is a million pixels. So say, for instance, if your camera can produce an image of up to almost 4,000 pixels by 2,500 pixels tall, you multiply those together, and that's where you get your megapixel value. So that particular combination of 3888 times 2592 is going to give you about 10 megapixels. Now, they've gotten crazy. Some of the professional stuff's up into 20, 40, 60, maybe even 100 megapixels now. It's just a crazy amount of information, much of which is not even applicable to a computer screen. It's just too many pixels for the screen. The screen can only do so much. But where this becomes important is when you're printing things out, especially poster size and above. You really need that level of information to convert your megapixels to points per inch, which is a different type of measuring things that we'll talk about in another video when we talk about printing out pictures and why they never look the same as they do on the screen. It's a different type of technology, a whole conversion process that needs to happen. As this little TechCrunch picture shows on here, you can see your little dots. You've got some greens, reds, blues, and they combine together to make that pixel, and the pixels combine together to make the digital image. So back in the day, at the beginning of computers and the beginning of digital cameras, you may have had a Sony Mavica, which took and stored pictures. I had one of the originals that stored pictures on a floppy disk back in the towards the mid-1990s. And you could only store at this small area, the 640 by 480. Now, if you look at those pictures today, they're horribly pixelated. They're nasty because most screens are much bigger than that now. Most computer screens are HD and above. So, and you can see how these are actually 640 by 480 is not even good for email and websites. This is back from our old PowerPoint. So you really need at least a 1600 by 1200 to email now, which is about 1.9 megapixels. And compressed, which we'll talk about later, is a very, very small file, very easy to send over broadband. And then you can go even higher, 2400 by 1800, which really, again, that was the minimum you could use for an 8 by 10 print without seeing pixelization, although today's spectrum for an 8 by 10, you really should double that now to get really, really clear, crisp pictures if you want to print stuff out. So you really need a high level of megapixels if you want to print things out, if that's your goal. If it's on a screen, you really don't need that many pixels because you're limited by what the screen can do, by the technology in the screen. So, all right, so we talk about dots per inch versus pixels per inch. And again, these are two different things here. And I don't want to get into the complicating thing because this is a basic course, but basically most computer monitors websites show things at 72 pixels per inch, but a decent print's going to need at least 200 dots per inch. So again, I don't want to go into, you could read some of this later, and there's a whole bunch of information on the internet, and also we'll go into it in a later video, but there's a big difference between the DPI, the dots per inch, and pixels per inch. And again, the bigger your image is in terms of megapixels and file storage, the more information you can store in an image, the better luck you're going to have printing it out, if that's what your intention is. If you have a small picture, you can still print it out big, but it's going to interpolate it, and you're going to start to see, I mean, the computer can only do so much through its algorithms, although they're very, very good, and it will try to fake that higher resolution as best it can by doubling. If you've got like a line of red, it's going to try to double that line of red. But once you start getting the edges, the seams between different elements of the picture, you're going to start seeing pixelization, and it's going to start looking like junk. So you really want as much information as you can if your intent is to print your image. So let's talk about digital camera features. We're going to start out with storage. So you need capacity and type. Now, back in the day, the cameras came with internal storage, which is small, not removable, and not upgradable. So if you had 8 megabytes on your camera, that's all you had. That's all you ever had. If you wanted to take more pictures, you had to dump that somewhere, erase it, and then hopefully it was stored somewhere safe where you could get to it again. Otherwise, you just erased it and never saw it again. Because once a digital image is overwritten, it's gone forever. So that's the downside, and the big mistake, in my opinion, that Apple is making with their iPhones, iPads, and all their stuff is they're making not removable, not upgradable storage. They make an iPhone, if you have 16 gigabytes of storage, that's all you will ever have. It's not upgradable. You can't change it unless you throw that thing away and get a new phone. Now, that's not as important with the cloud and all this stuff, but if you don't know how to use the cloud, if you're not really savvy, you may not know how to manage that space, and you're going to get really angry once that phone starts getting filled up with pictures and say, hey, not enough space to store anything else. You're going to go, what's going on? Especially if you're shooting video, because video takes up a tremendous amount of space. And you're really going to need some external storage for that. Now, Androids, including the most of the Samsungs, with a few exceptions, and the LGs, have a card slot in them for a micro SD adapter, which is this tiny little 16 gig thing on the side. And you could plug one of those actually into the side of your phone and get expandable and removable storage. So once that thing fills up, you can reach in your pocket, pop another one in, and just keep shooting. You don't have to dump all the stuff off of your phone or your device. And this is becoming the mini SD is becoming the standard now. for a lot of these phones with removable storage. And a lot of cameras have either the SD card or the micro SD, and they're only getting bigger and cheaper as we get production ramp ups along the lines here. So some other means of external storage back in the day, they're using compact flash for professional digital SLR cameras. Everything's kind of moved to SD, which is kind of the standard. The mini CDR has kind of gone away. They were using those for a while. It never really caught on. Sony kind of dances to the beat of their own drum. They really need to call me and promote me to their CEO, because I think there's a nut asleep at the wheel over there, and I can really guide them on what's going on in the real world. Smart media. Yeah, not so much smart media. XD cards are still in a few things, and Sony's memory stick is kind of taking a backseat to everything else that's gone away too. So it's SD and micro SD for the most part, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. Things are changing all the time. So your digital camera is going to have a whole bunch of features, and that's including your smartphones too. You're going to have the ability to set your own exposure control. And this is where you can do some really neat things, where you can do some ghosting, meaning if you have lights at night, if you're shooting fireworks, you can see the trails of them going up in the sky. If you want to shoot the moon, which is kind of like shooting the sun, somebody told me, you're going to have to set that to a manual setting because your automatic's going to fail. It's not going to know what to do, especially at night and dark light. So you can do all kinds of really cool things with the exposure control. Typically, things like this screen are only found in high-end digital SLR cameras. And but some of the smartphones are ending up with some of this stuff. A lot of it's interpolated, but you can have a lot of fun with it anyway and create some really neat special effects. So how does digital photography work? Well, the first thing you want to do is preview, and you're going to have an LCD screen, which is going to have your exposure control and a bunch of options on it. So you're going to be able to see what's on that screen before you shoot, which is really, really nice as opposed to the optical viewfinder. Now you can see the light and everything, and your eyes not messing with you because what you see is what you get on that LCD screen. So then you're going to capture it to a CDD or a CMOS, and you're going to be able to tell your camera, well, what resolution, how many megapixels do I want to capture this at? Do I want to do widescreen or just a regular box? So you have those options now too. And then where are you going to store this thing? You're going to store it to an internal card, to an external card, to a CD or something? And what mechanism, what format do you want to store it in? Do you want to store it as a compressed JPEG? Do you want to store it as an uncompressed TIFF? Or do you want to store it as a RAW image? And we'll talk about RAW versus compressed a little bit later on. And then how are you going to get those pictures out of here? Are you going to use a cable or a card reader or some kind of other mechanism, wireless, cloud? You're going to email them on your phone. And then number 5, what are you going to do with these pictures? Do you want to change it? Do you want to be able to touch it up, filter it, take some of the red out, make it a little brighter, a little darker? Do you want to crop it, scale it, print it? What are you going to do with this thing? What's your ultimate, your goal for this particular picture or set of pictures or this album? And then distribute. What do you want to do with it? You want to print it? You want to put it on a CD and mail it to people for marketing purposes or for your family or for archiving? Or you want to throw it on the web so everybody can see it immediately? Lots of choices here. And since this is a basic course, we're just going to touch on these things. We're not going to go in too much depth to try not to confuse you. So starting out with your preview. This is our personal, we have a Canon it's some kind of Rebel 4 or something, T4i or something. Beautiful LCD screen on it. And I took this with my smartphone just as a demo for this particular show. So we were taking video at this time of a local performer, Susanna Free. And it shows you exactly what's in your frame, how light it's going to be, and this is what you're going to see on the back end. And this is really powerful stuff because no longer do you have to guess what your picture is going to look like. You're going to see this right here on this LCD screen as it's being taken. In this particular SLR camera, the screen pulls out, and you can twist it and put it up real high and look at it in a different light, and it's all kinds of stuff. A million different settings on this camera. It's confusing as all get out. So you can see what you shoot before you shoot it, which is really nice on these LCD screens on most digital cameras and smartphones. So, and then how are you going to capture this thing? You're going to digitally record it, which means and again, it's basic. I don't want to go into too much detail here. You have 2 choices when you buy your device. Most of them use CCD. I believe they're still a little bit... These things change all the time, so don't quote me on this. By the time you watch this video, it could be something different, or they could reverse again, which they've flipped a couple of times now. So you have a CCD, which is a single chip that sits inside the back, and which records the photons which come in from the light which create the picture, which gives you the values of your color, your brightness, your contrast, and your composition, everything in that picture. This thing takes a quick little shot and records it digitally and stores it on your device somehow. Now, there's CCD versus CMOS, and I wrote size does matter because, there's a big, people talk about that all the time. It's quite a debate. So in this particular case, size does matter because now they have very large sensors, and the larger your sensor is, the more light information it can capture, and the more light information it can capture, the more accurate your digital image will be. So in the past, CMOS were bigger, CCDs were tiny. They're trying to save power and space and make things smaller, but now they've gotten a little bit bigger again. So now you can put a bigger sensor in there and stores a little bit more and better information. Again, the algorithms change all the time too, so they're able to shrink these things down as technology progresses. So here's a little ditty on CMOS versus CCD. Again, a lot of this stuff's dated. It may have reversed by then, but since CMOS sensors are so much bigger, they're more susceptible to digital noise due to the algorithms, the way it captures light or whatever. Now, that may be gone by now. I'm not sure. We need to do a little bit of a review on this, but again, it's basic. It's kind of beyond the scope of this thing. But back in the past, the CMOS chip couldn't capture as much light, so you had more of that noise. It tried to interpolate what's going on, and a lot of times you got reds and all kinds of little pixels, and they call it like fuzz on the screen. And the CMOS supposedly consumed less power. That may have flipped around by now. And CCD supposedly had higher quality pixels. You'll see, if you do a Google search on CCD versus CMOS, you'll see wars out there, virtual wars of text. People in two different camps saying that one person is terrible and the other guy's great, and vice versa. And basically what you need to know is they do the same thing. They capture light, turn it into pixels, and technology changes, and you can do some research to see what the current leader is, and again, it changes. I think it changes virtually weekly, so it doesn't really matter, to be quite honest with you, unless you're a professional photographer looking to do printing where the color and the composition really does matter. So you're going to store your images now. Where and how? So this is where the compressed versus non-compressed thing works out. And you can think of about a 5-to-1 ratio here. Now, raw is the big buzzword now. People are storing their images as raw, and you find more and more professional photographers doing that. What raw means is there's no compression on these things. What JPEG does, and JPEG is known as a lossy compression. So to make it really simple, it throws away a bunch of a bunch of, let's say, information that it thinks you may not need on that image. Certain colors, certain contrasts, lines, whatever. But since these images are so big, it's virtually imperceptible to the human eye. So to explain that, if you're going to this is why we would choose RAW. If you're going to choose RAW, if you're a professional photographer and you need to do a lot of photo editing on the back end, if you need to really zoom in or something and take an image and have the capability to draw it in and make a close-up from a really wide image, you want as much of that real information as you can store, as you can hold on that chip and store on that storage device. But if you're just shooting snapshots of a family vacation, JPEG is probably fine. I can tell you, I take everything in JPEG. The storage is more important to me. I rarely take raw images unless I'm taking family photos or something I want to print out poster size. So in most cases, most people, the default settings like a JPEG. There's also a TIFF in there, which is somewhere in between. It's a different type of algorithm, which has no compression, but it stores things differently. But supposedly RAW is the cleanest way to store a digital image. And that's why a lot of the pros are going there. But you need a tremendous amount of storage to store those things. At 25 megabytes a pop, that would really fill up a hard drive or a smart card very, very fast. And then where are you going to store it afterwards? Are you going to archive this stuff locally or on the cloud? If you're doing the cloud, you're probably paying for it, and you're limited by the amount of information you can put out there unless you upgrade your plan, and you can spend several $100s a year on the cloud. If you're storing it locally, it's going to be cheaper. But now you have to worry about your hard drives failing. So trade-offs are everywhere. This whole technology is basically still in its, I'd say maybe it's adolescence now, maybe not even there, maybe still in its childhood. We're still working out the kinks. Storage is still an issue. Reliability is an issue. And we're making up the rules as we go along. this is an old chart of megapixel versus points per inch versus DPI and file sizes. So you could take a look at this at your convenience. It'll tell you how high or how big an image will be. Say it's 6 megapixels on the bottom. Uncompressed in TIFF is going to be 17.5. Probably in RAW, maybe 20, 25 megabytes. So, and if you do a JPEG, it's going to be 3. So it's really a lot smaller to store things on a JPEG. And again, with today's megapixel cameras, you really store a whole bunch of compressed information. It's very, very difficult to tell that those images are different, that they have been compressed. I do have some examples coming up later on of old compression, and these are pictures taken back in the day at the beginning of this digital photography thing. I don't have any new ones. I do apologize for that, but you can find them easily on the internet. So most pictures, again, are stored using JPEG compression, and it's lossy. It tells you it omits some stuff there that's not obvious to the human eye. And the thing about JPEG compression is that it is adjustable, meaning that you can set it to a high compression, which really squeezes that down into a small file size, or you can make it like a pretty conservative, or it doesn't chop off much information at all. The trade-off, again, is file size. So, and again, you can store stuff on most professional digital cameras as a TIFF and a RAW. I think even a lot of smartphones are now offering some storage options too. So, and again, the larger the file, the longer it takes to save and retrieve, and the more you're going to have to spend on storage for archiving things if you keep things. So most people do. So, now the downside of compression is you get something called what they used to call jaggies and fringing. I'm not sure these terms are used anymore, but this was a JPEG saved at 80% quality. And then the next picture, if you look at the red word, because red, you really see the compression artifacts in red. And if I go to the next slide here, you can see how it kind of looks terrible, where you start seeing the jaggies and fringing. And this is a really highly compressed JPEG. Go back to the original one, and now back to here. And you can really see in the white and the red and the borders between them, a lot of the information has been thrown away. And then to reassemble the picture, it compresses it and it tries through an algorithm to put it back together. So before, after, so you can see. And again, this is zoomed in very, very tightly. And it's a night shot too, the worst case scenario, but to give you an idea of what compression does to a file. So you probably want to store it as a JPEG if you decide to go that way, because storage is important to you, and store it at a very low compression ratio, meaning you want to keep as much information as you can while still having compression. So, talking about how digital photography works, where are you going to store these images? Are you going to print them out like these old, oh, who's that charming young man? Oh, God, that's me. 1,000 years, there's my mom. We used to print things out and keep them in photo albums and scrapbooks, or throw them in a box somewhere. And I still have tons of boxes of these things, of pictures that I had to print out at the local photomat. Remember those? Yeah, I'm showing my age now. But now I can store all these pictures and thousands more in that little 1 gigabyte SD card. That's crazy, isn't it? That's nuts how much you can store on this. And that's a 1 gigabyte. That's kind of obsolete now. Now they're up to 32, 64, even 512 you can buy them now. And it's just to give you an idea how much you can store on those tiny little things. And these are what the old digital cameras were using. And now they're using the micro, which is just probably a fifth of the size of that, which you saw in a previous image. So the question is, where are you going to store these images? You want to keep them forever. And you want to do backups of them, and we'll talk about that later on too, because backups now are even more important. Before you had these pictures, which I still have, some of these pictures are 20 years old, probably 30, but especially that mustache. What am I wearing there? God, look at that hair. I look like John Oates. But the question is, I have these pictures and I've been able to hold on to them safely for 20, 30 some years. I can still scan these images and turn them into digital images. However, if I lose this little card, they're gone forever. I've got nothing. If I break it in half, I may not be able to retrieve anything on it. There's data recovery for a lot of this stuff, but in some cases, once that digital card or that digital storage device is gone or broken, man, you may be left without those images forever. So it's a very, very important question. Where are you going to store these things, and where are you going to archive them? And you need to think about this very, very clearly. So number 5, you may want to edit these pictures. And this is something, I was just amazed at how closely these two looked with their outfits. It was just really funny. And I was wondering if Tracy Morgan may have a lawsuit here. He may have to sue the creator of Shrek. I don't know, but you might want to edit things and put things together and put people on different people's bodies, people's heads on different people's bodies. There's a lot of fun you can have with digital editing. Not just to fix your pictures, because you want to fix your pictures too. You might want to take a sunset and make it a little brighter, change the colors, and do a lot of really cool things, which you can do with very, very easily and now inexpensive photo editing software like Adobe Photoshop. Elements is pretty cheap, or you can buck up the it's like $20 a month and get the full Adobe Photoshop, the latest version of that. And then there's PaintShop Pro, there's OrphanView, which is free, and a lot of the printer companies come out with their own software which will allow you to do some editing. And also Microsoft includes a whole bunch of stuff, and also Apple in their operating systems. And photo editor is pretty darn powerful stuff. I'm not sure if that's still around, but you have endless choice of editing software, and you can do all kinds of really neat things with these things. Remove backgrounds, again, change things around. You can actually put people in pictures that weren't there before. I did this in Photoshop. This is an old headshot that I used, and I took probably 20 years off my life. And I was able to brighten things up from the original digital image, which is a little too dark. So you could do really neat things like this, just like they do in Hollywood. Make yourself look like a celebrity. So very, very important. A lot of people don't realize that you should save your original images somewhere else. Create another directory with original pictures and save those originals before you start making those edits, because you may mess up and want to go back to that original, but if you've changed it forever, that's it. It's gone. So make sure you've got backups of all your original pictures before you start messing around with them. Now, what are you going to do with those images afterwards? You want to put them on a website? You're going to upload them to Facebook so your whole family and friends and people who hate you can see them? Or do you want to print them out and archive them that way? There's a whole bunch of choices. You can put them on CDs, you can put them on DVDs, you can put them on the web, you can store them in the cloud, just store them for yourself. What do you want to do with them? And that's going to be some questions in terms of the file format that you choose and whether you want things compressed or not. So, digital distribution, what do you do with those digital images? You can print them on an inkjet or laser printer. If you print them on an inkjet printer, you need to know that those pictures may not last because the ink tends to fade through ultraviolet radiation and light. It will actually knock out, especially the reds in those pictures. So you need something called archival ink and archival paper if you want to keep those images forever, or you need to store them in a really dark and temperate place. So if you print them at a Walgreens or Target, they essentially do that for you. In most cases, you may want to ask them what the current equipment they're using, but they typically do give you some kind of ultraviolet protection, and it's more of an archival ink and a paper. And if you printed it yourself. So important to know, if you print that out on an inkjet or laser printer, it may not last. If you intend to keep that forever or hang that on the wall with any type of sunshine in the room, which is virtually every room, you may want to have a professional print that out, or make sure you know what you're doing with archival ink and archival paper before you lose that image forever. There's online services, Shutterfly, Walmart. I think Walgreens and Target are online too. I've actually sent things on my phone through an app to Walgreens and was able to pick them up in an hour, even poster size stuff that I've taken and sent over there and cropped with my phone using their app. So a lot of choices now in terms of printing and storage. You can email your pictures to your friends and family, which a lot of people used to do. More people have gone with social media and web sharing now. If you want to keep it more private, of course, you're going to email it because you can choose who sees that. There's other ways to do that too. But you can publish them to the web and create like a photo album, an online photo album using Flickr, Google, Imgur, however you say that, Facebook or Dropbox, and then share that with whoever you want to share it with. Or you can burn them to a CD or DVD, although CDs and DVDs are becoming obsolete. A lot of new computers are being sold without them, and they are moving parts. It's old technology. There's some questions into reliability, which we discussed in our backing up video. So lots of choices of what you want to do with these pictures, more choices than you've ever had before. But it's important to recognize the purpose. When you're taking that picture, what do you want to do with it? How long you want to keep it? And do you want to keep it forever? So a bunch of different ways to get them from the camera to your PC. It's growing every day. Back in the day, you needed a docking station or a printing station to get it to your computer. And then these card readers came out where you could pop the card out of the camera and transfer it to your computer with a card reader. And then you can email them to yourselves too. If you have a smartphone, you can email your pictures to yourself. And There's always the USB cord on most things too, but nobody uses those anymore, which is really neat. What I use on my smartphone, which is essentially my primary camera now. I have a Samsung Note 4. The best digital camera on a phone, even better than some of my other cameras I've had in the past. It's probably the best camera I've ever seen. The pictures are super clear. The image sensor is just wonderful. It is great stuff. I was able to blow some of these things up in the posters, and they're amazing. And I use something called Dropbox. Now, they give you a free Dropbox, which they're starting to promote now, and I've upgraded. So now my wife and I take pictures on our smartphone. When we're connected to a Wi-Fi hotspot, it uploads our pictures to our Dropbox, which we're able to then access on our computer. So it's essentially a wireless connection. Every picture I take on my smartphone ends up in my Dropbox account. And my wife's does the same, and we share one account, and that's really nice. So essentially, we've got a backup. And Dropbox, by nature, actually backs up to your computer. So you've got a copy on your computer and a copy in the cloud, and you still have the original copy on your phone. So essentially, you're backed up twice, which is very nice and very important to us, especially with our family pictures. So just cover some of this stuff. Docking stations, largely irrelevant. You may still have a camera that requires a docking station. Those are before we had removable storage. So those are kind of gone away. Now these are kind of important now, although the other types of slots are largely unnecessary. Most laptops come with an SD card slot in the front. If you have always wondering what that little rectangular hole is in the front of your laptop, it's probably more than likely an SD card slot, which you could pop one of these cards into. So a whole bunch of different USB connections. There's A, B, micro, mini. I don't know. There's bazillions of them now. And you can plug virtually any camera into or smartphone into a computer using some kind of USB connection. Except for an iPad, because Apple has to be different. I don't know why. They just don't play nicely with other people. Now, managing your different... That was my Apple dig for this video. Now, cataloging your digital images... And I'm just mad at Apple because they don't play nicely. Why couldn't they just put a USB thing on that thing and just play nicely with everyone else? Then I got to have all these different cables for my Apple stuff, and never mind. So cataloging, you're going to need to manage those. We talked about that in the beginning of the video. Before you end up with this giant folder like I have with thousands of pictures, which are no rhyme or reason, no semblance, no organization, man, it's just a disaster, and I really need to go through it. I'm guilty as charged, but you don't want to be that way. So you can catalog using... Every Windows computer has software built in, but there's a bunch of different ways to do it. There's CompuPicker from View AC/DC, which is popular with a lot of professional photographers, Photoshop. Kodak EasyShare, if that's still around, used to do that stuff. And it gives you ways to put all those pictures into nice little folders. You think of folders just like a file cabinet. And on your computer, you have a whole bunch of folders. You can put all those folders in your hard drive as your file cabinet, and those folders separate all that information so you can easily find things. So don't be like me. Organize your pictures or you're going to drive yourself nuts. So when you plug a digital camera into a computer, if you're doing that, or if you plug your card, your little SD card into the front of that little rectangular slot in your laptop you never knew what did, you're going to see this little thing pop up. And this is back in XP. We took a picture of it. It's going to look similar to this in Windows 7, 8.1. And also 10. And it's going to say, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to copy these pictures to a folder on my computer? Yeah, I do. And you're going to say, all right, well, here's the wizard. And you click next. And it's going to say, all right, which ones do you want to copy? You can select all. And then you're going to type a name for the group. And that name that you give, that you assign this thing, is actually going to be the name of the folder, which will end up under your pictures folder, which is great. I mean, if you just went out and took a whole bunch of pictures of you and the family at the zoo. You call My Day at the Zoo, June 2017. And it will create a folder with that and put all those pictures in that nice, tidy little folder, and you'll always know where they are. When you back it up, it'll copy that backup information over to it. It's just the right way to do it. You do have the option here in the older things to delete pictures from my device after copying them. That's back in the days when you had no removable storage and you really needed that space again. So you're essentially just moving them off your camera and putting them on your computer. But again, no need to do that anymore because you've got virtually unlimited space with and removable storage. Unless, of course, you have an iPhone, and never mind. Apple needs to call me and hire me. I could be CEO of Apple and Sony simultaneously. Really, I have a lot of free time. So it'll go through this whole thing, and again, this is the XP version. It's obsolete. The new ones look very, very similar to this. And then you end up with this folder underneath your pictures directory, and it's got a nice little name, and you're organized for this point forward. So. All right, now let's talk about some of the things about digital images, visual truth. You can't have a video without having an ethics lesson. Now, is seeing still believing? Maybe, maybe not. Are digital photos legal as evidence? As we're seeing in most cases, digital photos and videos are admissible. Should news photos be manipulated? No, they shouldn't be manipulated, but they do it anyway. Is it deceptive to alter an advertising video? Well, you answer that one. Now, blah, blah, blah. You can see all this stuff here, and you can see what some people have done to pictures, which may or may not be the right thing to do. Now, we have this picture of this crowd. You may have seen this. It's very, very pixelated because this is old. Again, I pulled this example back from probably 2007. This crowd at this college game, not going to talk about which college, although I think it shows up in the picture later. So they didn't have much ethnic diversity in this picture. So somebody found another picture and said, hey, if this guy's at a college game, he'd look great in my picture and we could show some diversity. So what did they do? They morphed him into the picture using Photoshop and put it on there. Look at him. How did they get that guy in there? That's some very creative Photoshopping, though. When I'm looking at that, they just cut him out and just sliced him in there and put him in there. And wow, all of a sudden, Wisconsin has some diversity. Is that ethical? Probably not. But is advertising ethical? You know, it's psychology. It's just the way our society is working. So you can't always believe what you see, especially in the digital realm. Now, not to say they didn't do this when there was film, too, because people used to do this in film. And how do you think they did effects back in the analog days in movies? They did a lot of really cool stuff by doing stuff like this. So the possibility and the technology involved is awesome entertainment-wise, but is it ethical? In some cases, probably not. So here's a little picture. We kind of blew up J-Lo and made her look a little different if she was an average woman. And also they did it to Gwyneth Paltrow, too. I didn't do these. These were the things we found on the internet. Some genius created these things. It's something called Fat Booth, I think. But you wouldn't know that these pictures weren't real if you didn't know any better. So the digital realm is giving you giving the average person all kinds of creative freedom to create things which may not exist in reality. So you really have to take a second look at things. And is seeing believing? Not always. So talk about the future of digital photography as we wind up the end of this presentation. The future is here. We've got smartphones with unbelievable photographic quality. iPhone 6, amazing. The Samsung S6 and Note 4, mind-blowing. The LG's got laser focus, really cool stuff that we've never had before in the history of mankind, be able to record everything in stunning detail. You're seeing cameras show up in watches, smart watches, and the Google Glass. So you never know where those cameras are going to be. Somebody might have one on their wrist, and you never know if it's pointed at you. So beware. Better sensors coming out. Constant improvement in algorithms behind the processing that's going on in both CMOS and CCD sensors. So the pictures are always getting better, brighter, and truer to life. 3D stuff is coming out. One of our interns is actually working on his thesis on a 3D project. More information coming on that soon. Things are changing. Your resolution is going to get better and better. You're going to have wireless. You already do through Dropbox. Wireless transfer to computer and even to your printer. A lot of the smart printers, the e-printers, you can print directly off your phone or your pad or your computer now without ever having to transfer that document or without ever having to transfer that digital image from one thing to your computer. Easier printing, like the Walgreens app, where you can just send it right there. And they've got kiosks, which will actually, you can bump your phone up against it and transfer a picture to it. And lots of different services coming out if you want to print stuff out. And of course, storage is getting cheaper and better. There is a transition going on right now at this time where we're moving from moving hard drives to solid state hard drives. And that is coming into effect, should be pretty mainstream by 2016. And a little expensive now, but it's cheaper and cheaper, and it should be a little bit more reliable as we go down the road. So that's it. That is the basics of digital photography. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We check them periodically. And if you have any helpful information or tips, or if I've made any mistakes, please feel free to correct them in the comments below. And again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And thanks for watching. We'll have more videos on digital photography and some more advanced topics coming up soon. My name is Chuck Fresh. I'm the PCGYN. This is Computer Care Clinic's Tip of the Day.